Hello, Frizzle Federation. Today we're going to be seeing if I can find some new favorite authors. I, like the huge nerd that I am, determine who's a favorite author by a formula. So currently there are 11 authors that have met the favorite author threshold, which is, according to the formula, they have reached a score of 1 point, which is like getting 100% favorite author status. So today in this video, I'm taking a few authors that are really close to hitting this favorite author threshold and seeing, reading another book from them, if they have what it takes to join my ranks of favorite authors. So here is how the favorite author formula works. I rate every book that I've read from that author from 5 stars down to 1 star. And depending on how much I like the books, on what the books get star rating wise, they get different scores to that author. A 5-star book brings that author positive 1/3 of a point, 33%. A 4-star brings that author positive 1/8 of a point, or 13%. A 3-star brings negative 1/15 of a point, or -7%. A 2-star brings that author a -1/8 of a point, -13%. And a 1-star is the hefty penalty of a -1/3 of a point, -33%. So, 4 stars and 5 stars bring that author closer to favorite author status. 1, 2, and 3 stars bring that author farther away from favorite author status. And today, the 3 authors that I'm going to be reading new books from are all 1 5-star away from achieving favorite author status. So if I find a single 5-star in this video, that author becomes a favorite author. The authors that I'm reading from today are Susanna Clarke, Heather Fawcett, and Katherine Addison. So let's go. Our favorite author candidate is Susanna Clarke. Here's the star ratings that I've given her books. As you can see, it is only 5 stars. I've only read 2 Susanna Clarke books, Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, and Piranesi, and I loved them both. They're very different from each other in writing style and length, but share a Susanna Clarke-ness that I love about both of them. A specificality of narration style that really helps you get to know the characters, that it's just exquisite. Anyway, so I wanted to read another Susanna Clarke book, obviously, but she only has one other book out, which is The Ladies of Grace Adieu. And this is a short story collection. So we've got some things going for Susanna Clarke in that I've only ever given her 5 stars, right? I love her work. But I'm not a general lover of short story collections. Like, they're fine, but none of my favorite books are short story collections. So it's time to give this one a shot. And if I give the book 5 stars, then Susanna Clarke is an official favorite author. So how are we going to determine if a collection of short stories is 5 stars? Well, when I'm reading a short story collection, I will give a star rating to every individual story, and then at the end I will average them all up. And then I will take that total and round it up to the nearest star rating, because I like to be a little generous with my star ratings and I generally round them up anyway. So if my average opinion of all these short stories is over a 4, then the book gets 5 stars. So that means with these 8 short stories that we need a total of 33 stars awarded. And here are the 33 stars that we're looking for. And we're gonna fill it out as we go. I'm excited. So if we fill up this entire chart, the book gets 5 stars and Susanna Clarke becomes a favorite author. The first story in this collection is the titular story, The Ladies of Grace Adieu. Most of the stories in this collection take place in the same world as the novel Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, and this one has direct connection to it as Jonathan Strange is one of the characters in the story. He's a famous magician traveling to the small town of Grace Adieu in order to visit his brother-in-law. But he's not the main character of this short story. The main characters are these 3 women, and they're studying magic in contrast to the way Jonathan Strange is doing it, in a very wild and the joy and potential of humans in magic kind of way. I loved seeing a character that I enjoy, Jonathan Strange again, but I also really loved seeing the female friendship that is the emphasis of this book. Like, you've got this little coven of lady wizards supporting each other, debating magic with each other, learning together, and really enforcing each other's freedom and happiness. I also really loved the subtle storytelling in this short story, where it doesn't come out and say always what's happening. It just kind of leaves a lot of things to the implication for the reader to pick up on. So I'm going to give The Ladies of Grace Adieu 4 stars. And here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Stamp says Brilliant. Which I do acknowledge you can't really tell what the design of the stamp is once we have it on the star, so maybe I could have thought that through better, but I have fun stamping, so we're going to continue with this program. I've read a few more of the short stories in this book, so let me keep telling you about them. The next one is called On Licorice Hill. And this is one of the stories that I'm very glad that I'm listening to the audiobook for, because apparently this is one of the stories that really embraces having old-timey spelling conventions, which I, as a dyslexic person that already struggles a lot with spelling, would find completely terrible. But the audiobook is very pleasant to listen to. So this story is a Rumpelstiltskin retelling. We are from the perspective of the maiden who is given an impossible task that she must complete and enlists a somewhat evil fairy to help her do it. And I really loved how this book played with this unique perspective of this woman where she's kind of stupid and silly for a lot of parts of the book. Like, she's not exactly the most likable protagonist. I was definitely pretty annoyed with her decisions some of the time. But then she's got this duality to her where, though she often comes across as quite silly and stupid, on the other hand, she successfully manipulates a lot of the people around her, like, quite deftly. So I'm left with this curiosity of, is her silliness more of an act for people to underestimate her, or is her manipulation more of lucky chance? And I love how this story has that extra dose of tension just through the narrative style of it. But I can't say that I completely loved this short story because I kept waiting for it to do like something interesting with the Rumpelstiltskin retelling, and it never quite got there ever. And so On Licorice Hill gets 3 stars. We're gonna give it a good job stamp. Which does mean that we are now officially a little behind of where we should be for our goal of 33 stars, but we are still comfortably able to reach it, probably. We're just gonna need like a 5-star to offset the 3 that we just got. So what did I give the next story in this book? The next one is called Mrs. Mab. This follows a woman who is in love with a man. They are betrothed. The woman goes off to go take care of a sick friend, and when she comes back a few months later, she finds that her man has run away to be with another woman. She's very upset. And though part of her wants to be a very reasonable, level-headed woman that just lets go of the man and moves on with her life, she can't quite move on with her life because she's still in love with this man. So she starts trying to go visit Mrs. Mab, the woman who her man is now with. And she encounters many problems and fairy magic along the way of this little quest. I find it interesting looking at Susanna Clarke's full body of work, where this story and other things I've read by her really have a theme of persistence, where our character is often in this muddled state of forgetting things and remembering things, and even though they don't always have all the details or know exactly what they should do or what's going on, they keep persisting. However, I also found this story kind of dull, because for a lot of the book, the protagonist doesn't really know what's going on or what she should do. And it makes it really hard to root for a protagonist that isn't doing anything or doesn't know what she's doing or doesn't know what to do. Like, how am I supposed to cheer her on when nothing is happening? It wasn't quite spooky enough for me to feel the tension of the moment, and it wasn't quite triumphant enough for me to cheer on the moment, so the moments were just kind of dull. But I did like the story overall. I think Mrs. Mab gets another 3 stars. It gets a solid like badge. Which honestly, now this is starting to get a little stressful because I know exactly, like, I'm a few stars behind, but the stories could still pull it off, okay? Okay. And I've read one more story so far, which is The Duke of Wellington Misplaces His Horse. And this story is exactly what the title says. His horse wanders into fairy, he wanders after the horse, there is a brief bit of somewhat boring conflict, he finds the horse, he gets back home. It's definitely the shortest short story I've read so far, and it just, like, gave nothing. Like, was boring, explored, like, 0 interesting concepts or character or anything. I kind of want to give it 2 stars, and I think if it was longer and still gave this little, I would give it 2 stars, but it was short enough that I was never bored or, like, considered giving up on the story, so it gets at least 3 stars, but I don't really have much to say on it. I don't think this is a very good story, and I think it needed workshopped in order to actually be anything interesting. So I think let's give it the Keep Going award. Barely scrapes by with 3 pity stars. So here we are after 4 stories at 13 stars, a little bit behind of where we should be to reach the goal, but if I get some 5-star stories in the next half of this book, it will all balance out and the short story collection could still get 5 stars as a whole. So let's see. And now I've read the rest of the stories in this book. So let me tell you about how they all went and how we stack up on our star chart here. The next story is Mr. Simonelli, or the Fairy Widower. This story is about a man, Mr. Simonelli, who goes to a new town and he encounters some strange folk there. They are, as I think all of these stories contain, some fae. And they have some wicked doings, which Mr. Simonelli is kind of fighting them against, but in a weird way. He's a intensely dislikable person. You're reading his journals and he's constantly like being super judgy and also super incompetent all in one, and it's unpleasant to read. I do really appreciate the entertainment value of reading from a perspective like that. Like, yes, it is kind of, I think in this case, a little too overdone and getting into the annoying category, but the narration is never once boring. But like so many of the stories in this collection, I feel like the ending somewhat fizzled out and was underwhelming. There's all these little ways that it could go, and then it didn't go like any of the ways. And it was just kind of disappointing in the end. But I liked my time with it enough, I think, to give this story 3 stars. We really can't get an angle there where it doesn't shine with this lighting, can we? I think we're gonna give it the needs more work stamp, because it was almost there. The bones of this story were interesting and compelling. It just didn't actually end up using those bones to go somewhere. So we are pretty behind of our goal, but let's see. Then we have the story of Tom Brightwind, or How the Fairy Bridge Was Built at Thornby. So this one is also told in a very compelling narrative style, where we are from the perspective of a man. He is a Jewish doctor living in London, and he has a friendship with a very powerful fairy named Tom Brightwind. And they are genuinely friends. And that's such a contrast to so many of the other stories in this collection where the fae are so dangerous. To have a fairy that maybe is dangerous but isn't dangerous to our narrator, interesting twist. And again, like most other stories in this collection, the perspective is interesting and I think could have a lot of potential. And then the story fizzles out. The story didn't have enough stakes, didn't have enough direction, didn't feel like there was really anything on the line or going on. So it was cool, but this story also gets 3 stars. Which stamp should we use? You know, this is a little bit of a high 3 stars. I think I'm gonna give it our good job stamp. 3 more stars for this book. As you can tell, we are a little bit behind of the goal. Let's talk about the next story in this collection. The next story is called Antics and Frets. It is from the perspective of Mary, Queen of Scots. She is scheming to kill Queen Elizabeth. She meets a lady who, the rumors say, killed her husband with magic. So Mary, Queen of Scots, wants some of this killing magic for her own so she can assassinate her enemy, Queen Elizabeth. And so this story is her trying to discover this killing magic and the secrets through subtle court manipulations and talking. And it was kind of boring. I guess I enjoyed the scheming, but it was just meh. I feel like this and so many more stories in this collection I would enjoy so much more if I was a fan of British history. And I am a little bit familiar with British history. I have heard of all of these historical famous figures that we're mentioning here, but I'm not like in the British history fandom. You know what I mean? I think to really love this collection of short stories, you have to both be in the Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell fandom, and even more importantly, you have to be in the British history fandom. Because if I already cared about Mary, Queen of Scots, I think I would have gotten a lot more out of this story, but as is, it's getting 3 stars from me. And I think this one is going to get our very boring checked stamp. Because yeah, I read it. It was a story, and it had some elements that were kind of entertaining. Checked. Sure. Oh! I bet you guys caught on to this, and I didn't. I neglected to stamp a star back here, so we are actually 1 farther along than we should be. Okay, I guess it's going backwards, and we're checking it now. 1, 2, 3 more stars. And now, what did I think of the final story in this collection? John Usglass and the Cumbrian Charcoal Burner. So, as you can see, this is our last story of the collection, so it needs to get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 out of 5 stars. So, yeah, let's just talk about the story. I really liked the story a lot more than a lot of others in this collection. It was a lot more narrative focused. We have 2 main players in this story, John Usglass and the Charcoal Burner. So, John Usglass is a powerful magician and king, the Raven King, and the Charcoal Burner is a poor man who is ignorant but is very persistent in getting what he wants. One day, John Usglass causes this peasant man a small inconvenience. The peasant man goes begging to the saints to help him get his revenge. There's some magical revenge fought on, and then everything starts escalating as this sorcerer king is like, how dare you curse me? I'm gonna curse you back. And then they keep going back and forth a little bit. It's entertaining and fun. It was like finally a story in this collection where there are things on the line, where not only is there compelling narrative style, but also like characters I'm genuinely interested in, where there is a sense of things moving forward in the plot. Yay! I thought for a while on what I wanted to give this story, because it is so much better than a lot of the other ones in the collection. But when I asked myself, did you love this story? The answer is no. I liked it, and I liked it quite a lot. It is between a 3 and a 4, and edging towards a 4, but more honestly, a 3. It did not meet the heights of love that a 4 requires. So, 3 more stars. But we can certainly give it the like heart stamp. And if it had just been a smidge better, it would have gotten 4. So in the end, this whole collection got 25 total stars. Dividing by 8 total stories, that gives us an average star rating of a 3 1/8, which is 3.1. And I did say by my rules that we would always round up. So that gives the entire collection 4 stars. Honestly, thinking about my feelings of this collection, it feels more like a 3 star at this point, but I think that's partly because the 4 star is so far away in my memory, the very first story of the collection, that everything kind of fizzled out. Maybe if this 4 star had been the last story of the collection, I would have felt better about it at this point. Anyway, but I'll give it a 4. So what does this mean for Susanna Clarke in the favorite author candidacy? Well, she does not get the 5 stars she needed to become a favorite author candidate. However, her score is improved. She has gone up from a 67% to a 79%. Still a 5 star away from 100%. But definitely, whatever her next release is, I'm picking it up. Our next favorite author candidate is Heather Fawcett. I've read 4 books by Heather Fawcett, and here is the star rating distribution. The 2 5 stars are the first 2 books in the Emily Wilde series. The 4 star is an enchanting middle grade, The Grace of Wild Things, and the 2 star is a young adult adventure, Even the Darkest Stars. So right now, Heather Fawcett is sitting at the precarious score of 0.67. If she got a 5 star, the score would be 1.00. But I think we have a real chance of getting a 5 star here for Heather Fawcett, catapulting her into the favorite author camp, because I am reading Emily Wilde number 3. So what is this story about without spoiling any of the books in this series? The series takes place in magical early 1900s following Professor Emily Wilde. She studies fairies for a living. And each book is following her on a scholastic mission, a little quest to study a new fairy, a new type of thing. For example, in the first book, she's compiling an encyclopedia of all the fairy types, and there's one type left that she really needs to learn about, so she is journeying to a far-off country in order to study the fairies. One of the other main characters of this series is Professor Wendell Bambleby, her academic rival. He tags along with her on her research missions, and he is the sunshine to her very grumpy. And throughout the books, there's a slow burn romance between them, which I absolutely adore. These books are like 80% studying the fairies with a real focus on the scholarship of it, and 20% fun romance that I really love. And I am completely obsessed with books 1 and 2. I just reread book 2 in preparation for book 3, and book 2 was even better on a reread. Like, I am so in love with all of this. So, how is book 3 going? Well, it's going really, really well. I'm about halfway through it right now, and I'm feeling 5 stars about this book. Yay! Here in book 3, we are following Emily and Wendell in a new adventure. And in this book, they are spending a lot of time in the realm of fairy. So there's the normal world that fairies come and visit sometimes, and then there's the fairy world that humans come and visit sometimes. And the other 2 books took place mostly in the normal human world, and then this book is taking place mostly in the fairy world. And it's creating such an interesting bundle of new conflicts for our protagonist, because her whole life has been dedicated to studying the fairies, and she's given this awesome opportunity to go visit the land of fairy and really get in-depth chance to study it. She's so excited to do that. But there's also the tension and conflict in this novel where she has to make a decision in this book of how much does she want to dedicate herself and her life to fairy. Like, she has the opportunity to potentially live in fairy for the rest of her days, happily writing papers and studying the fairies. But does she actually want to take that chance. And so much of this book so far has been exploring the pros and cons of that. Of, yes, fairies are really fun to study and so full of magic and wonder and amazing things, but also they're super dangerous and deadly and weird and could really corrupt you and your mind in nasty ways if you stay in fairy for too long. There's some real danger there. Something that I think this book has been so clever in doing is we spent nearly the entire first half in fairy, really exploring all of these dangers and wonders and all of it. And then we've just had a section where we had a few chapters where Emily left Fairy back for the human world. And she got to reunite and reconnect with old human friends from the first two books. She got to really talk things through with them and think harder for herself and have more misgivings of, do I really want to go back to Fairy? Is going back permanently really a good decision? And I just love how this author is crafting such a smart narrative, where it's not only giving Emily this somewhat impossible choice, but also guiding us, the reader, through the pros and cons of this impossible choice. Like, I think right now I'm rooting for her to decide to stay in Fairy, but I'm not sold on it. And I love that conflict that is being sown in both the protagonist and the reader through all of these interesting examples. And the romance development between Wendell and Emily has likewise been fantastic in this book. We've gotten some very cute moments, we've gotten some moments of strain between them, and I am so excited to see where everything in this book goes. So I've finished the Emily Wilde book, and I can't keep you in suspense. I have to tell you the very good news that it's getting 5-star, and that is putting Heather Fawcett into the favorite authors. So Heather Fawcett now has a score of exactly 1.00, 100% favorite author. Just barely skimming her way into the favorite author list, but I'm very excited to continue picking up books from her. Now, I don't know how very excited I am, because the Emily Wilde books are her only books that are written for adults. All of the rest of her books are written for kids. I have given a 4-star to one of her books written for kids, a middle grade, and I am going to continue to pick up her other books written for kids because I'm excited to explore more of her backlist. But also I'm really worried that I'm not gonna like some of them, and it's gonna topple her off of the favorite authors list. Because she's really precarious there right now. Like a single 3-star would knock her right off, so. What can I say about Emily Wilde number 3? The ending was spectacular. I loved it. It definitely wraps up the 3 books as a solid trilogy, and I don't know if Heather Fawcett is planning to write any more, but it leaves it open enough that we could follow these characters on more adventures in the future. These books have an interesting, almost meta element where there's a lot of discussion about the power of folklore and stories, because our main character, Emily Wilde, is a fairy researcher. She knows all the folklore about the fairies, and that really informs her worldview and how she interacts with the fairies on a day-to-day basis. And then so much, especially the second half of this book, was hinging on her knowledge and research of fairy stories. And I love how this book really came back to its roots, that even though it was like we're going on this grand adventure in the fae realm, but also we have to go to the library to research. And that is like a pivotal step for solving the problem in this book. And yeah, I just have so much overflowing love and happiness for this book. And I'm both excited and nervous to pick up more books from Heather Fawcett. Of course, if she ever publishes another novel in the series, another novel for adults, I'm there in a moment. I think I will also eventually be working my way through her books for children, because I'm just excited to explore more of what she's written. Because I just really trust her skill as a writer, that even though middle grade books aren't typically my forte, I think I could still find some ones that I love in her writing. And that's really what being a favorite author means to me, is that I love their writing enough that I am there for like everything that they want to write. Even if it's not my typical genre, or even if it's not my typical age range that I love, like it's still where I want to be.
The next of our favorite author candidates to explore is Katherine Addison. She currently sits at a score of 0.71. I have read 1 5-star and the rest are 4 stars. They all take place in the same fantasy world that has some elves and goblins, is a little bit of steampunk, but a lot of the books are following different characters. For example, my 5-star, The Goblin Emperor, is following a goblin who becomes emperor of the Elven Kingdom. But right now, the books I am starting from her is The Tomb of Dragons, and this is following one of her reoccurring characters, Thara Kelleher. And he is what is called a witness for the dead, and this means that he can like touch corpses and kind of commune with the soul of the person who lived. And then he serves both a religious function in officiating funerals and stuff through this power, but he also serves a judicial function because he's often called upon to like solve murder mysteries. Because when you can talk to the deceased, even though the ghosts are oftentimes not very helpful in actually solving the mystery, anyway, it's a big boost. And we followed this guy for a few books now, and a lot of his arc is about opening himself up to making friends, because he starts out the series in a state of grief. He's recently lost a lover through tragic circumstances, and he doesn't get a lot of joy from his job, but there's still some like fulfillment that he gets from it. So you're following him in his quiet, shy kind of way, solving murder mysteries, and also in his quiet, shy kind of way, slowly making new friends. And this book continues that, with the added murder mystery that the mystery that he's solving isn't the death of a person per se, but more of the death of a dragon. He's gotten himself in the right pickle this time, accidentally communed with like the ghost of a dragon, and has a new case. And it's so fun. I'm really loving this book. Here's some pros and cons if you're considering picking up books by Catherine Addison, because her works have this special je ne sais quoi that I have not found in many other places. Her books are so character focused and slow and almost cozy in their plotlessness a lot of the times. Like, even though we have these murder mysteries, they are very low stakes murder mysteries most of the time. Not much happens in these books really from chapter to chapter. You're just getting to know the characters as they go about their day-to-day lives, which are sometimes entertaining, but oftentimes like a little mundane. For example, in this book where the main plot is solving a mystery around dead dragons, we've had several scenes of trying to find new coats, because his current coat was all threadbare, and then he lost it, and then he got a new coat, but he didn't really like that coat. So then he went to a different friend who was a seamstress and tried to get the other coat repaired, or like tried to get a replacement coat. Like, we've had several scenes just dealing with replacement coats. And I've loved them because I'm loving following the character, and it's that slow, close look on the character and him dealing with the coat situation. And through dealing with the coat situation, he's also dealing with his own feelings of how poor he is and how he's in this muddle of bureaucracy that can't get him better wages. He's also dealing with his feelings about asking his friends for help, because his friends know some good tailors and his friends are willing to give him coats, but he is uncomfortable with accepting those because he's struggling with the concept of friendship, etc. So though we do have occasional scenes of action, adventure, high stakes mystery, I don't want to pitch this book to people who love thrillers or mysteries, because it's really for the people who love the day-to-day life. And I really love the mix here of the intellectual puzzles and the day-to-day life. Hello, hello.
Hello. Surprise.
My husband brought me ice cream.
Filming a video?
I was just wrapping up the clip.
Oh, nice. It's the good kind.
Of course it's the good kind. What else would he bring home? So, predicted rating halfway through the book is 4 stars, and I'm very excited to see it could get bumped up to 5. And even if it isn't, I'm excited to pick up more books from Catherine Addison, because so far every single one of them has been a lot of fun.
So I finished The Tomb of Dragons, and it maintained its tone throughout. It was very quiet, contemplative. And I think something that I really appreciated in the second half of this book is that it continued to explore the theme of our protagonist developing friendships, which is really hard for him. He got to not make new friends, but deepen the friendships that he already had. He gets into some sticky situations with his investigations, and because of that, he really needs a lot more help. He starts more relying on his friends for that help and having their relationships be strengthened. Because of that, it's a beautiful little arc there. This is the third and I think final book following this particular character. There's definitely a satisfying ending to his arc at the end of this book. I think it caps off the trilogy very well. Am I gonna give it 5 stars? No, I think it's a 4-star love. Definitely appreciated this book for what it was. I think if I were to give a few nitpicks of why I didn't quite get 5 stars, my romantic ship didn't turn out. There was still a happy ending, but not quite the one I was really rooting for, which gave me some disappointment. I think it's the main character of this book that also drags it down a teensy bit for me, where he is so reserved that it becomes a little difficult for me to relate to him as a reader. His emotions are so buttoned up all the time, it's hard for me to get fully invested. So with this 4-star for Tomb of Dragons, Catherine Addison moves from a score of 0.71 to a score of 0.83, 83% of the way to favorite author status. So though, alas, she doesn't get to join the ranks today, she's moved a little bit step closer, and I'm definitely considering picking up some more of her books soon, maybe featuring her in another episode of trying to find a new favorite author. So this is definitely the most successful favorite author candidates video I've ever made, because every single author got positive points. First time that's ever happened. For Susanna Clark, a 4-star brought her up to a score of 0.79%. For Heather Fawcett, a 5-star brought her into favorite authorship. She's joined the list of my favorite authors. It is a very precarious position because a single 1, 2, or 3-star will knock her back out of it again. But I have hope. And Catherine Addison, with a 4-star pulling her up, ends with a score of 83%. If you enjoyed watching this video, I do recommend my other favorite author candidates videos. Thank you for watching.